Greetings, my dear viewer. This is a channel about marital infidelity and about the consequences if one spouse starts to cheat on the other. If you, as well as I do, support true family values and condemn cheating, then subscribe to the channel and give this video a like. Let's get started. We had been on mounted patrol for nearly 4 hours heading back toward base when everything changed. Inside the Humvee sat 4 Marines. Sergeant Simon Hammond, myself, Lance Corporal Zachary Ramirez, Private Luke Buford, and our team leader Corporal Grant Kaufman. I had just leaned over to Grant with a warning: might want to keep your head down. This place isn't exactly welcoming. His response was flippant, almost daring. So what? Let them try. A sudden crack shattered the relative quiet, the unmistakable report of a .30 caliber sniper rifle. They say the shot you never hear is the one that kills you. 3 of us registered the sound. Grant never had the chance. A precise hole marred the skin just beneath his right eye, his helmet, the only thing keeping his head from completely coming apart without a moment's hesitation. Buford swung into action, gripping the .30 caliber and unleashing a steady stream of suppressive fire as we tore away from the kill zone. Ramirez cursed, his voice sharp with frustration. What the hell was thinking he made himself a goddamn target? Grant had been off for weeks, reckless in a way that felt deliberate-like. He was daring something or someone to take him down. That night our unit gathered in silence, the weight of Grant's loss settling over us like a lead blanket. Captain Blackwell, our company commander, stepped into the room, his presence commanding but solemn attention. He ordered, though his voice lacked its usual force, his gaze locked in. To me, Simon, I was going through Kaufman's things. There are some letters in here that you and the others need to read without another word. He set 2 envelopes on a bunk and walked out. I picked up the first one instantly, recognizing the handwriting. It was from Grant's wife. Skimming the lines, I felt a knot tighten in my stomach before I forced myself to read it aloud. Grant, I'm sorry, but I've met someone else. I'm filing for divorce. The distance is just too much. Please stay safe. Elena, sliding the letter back into its envelope, I opened the second, just a few days newer. But the words hit like a sledgehammer. My hands gripped the paper tighter as I read. Hey, Grant, remember me? Probably not. We never got along. Guess what? I've been seeing your soon-to-be ex-wife. She's incredible. We're getting married after the divorce. Hope you can make it to the wedding. If not, send a gift. Ashton. A wave of disgust spread through the room. Someone muttered what a piece of the letter from Elena had been a wound. But this was a knife twisted deep. We all understood then. Grant hadn't just fallen to a sniper's bullet. He had been crumbling long before that shot was fired. The betrayal had drained the fight from him. Some of us reservists from the same hometown felt an unspoken agreement settled between us: when we got back, we'd make things right. None of us had been particularly close to Grant before deployment, but combat binds men in ways deeper than friendship. We owed him that much. I took charge with Ramirez, Buford, and a handful of others backing me. Returning home meant slipping back into my old life. Simon Hammond, 29, single Indiana University graduate, managing one of my father's tire stores. But the letters haunted me, tucked away with Captain Blackwell's silent approval. I showed them to my father, a Vietnam Marine veteran who needed no explanation when I told him I might need some time off. He simply nodded. The first step was tracking down Grant's last known address. Of course, Elena had moved, leaving behind no trace. The neighbors had no clue where she had gone, but I had a hunch she was. With Ashton, I started frequenting bars near Grant's old neighborhood, blending and keeping my ears open. Eventually, I met someone who knew both Grant and Elena. I kept it casual, steering clear of any mention of Grant's death. The guy mentioned seeing Elena at a place called Maggie's Bar. That was all I needed. I made Maggie my new spot, showing up regularly, becoming a familiar face. And then one night, luck struck. A group of about 15 co-workers walked in, and among them was a woman named Elena. She wasn't strikingly beautiful, but she had a presence, one that made it clear why she'd caught Grant's heart. If this washer, my plan was already forming. I've always had an easy way with women, a mix of charm and a well-maintained physique. It made the long nights in bars work in my favor. Among her group was a man who stood out tall, broad, and carrying himself with the arrogance of a lifelong bully, Ashton. I eased my way in, joining a game of pool, working myself into their circle. Slowly, I became part of the scenery, a known figure in their after-work gatherings. Ashton didn't seem to like me, but Elena, she was warming up bit by bit. I knew I was making progress when I caught the whispers. The glances, the subtle questions. I had become more than just another guy at the bar. I was inside their world now, and I was just getting started. I was fully aware that much of my initial appeal to the women came from the simple fact that I was a fresh face. That novelty, however, wouldn't last forever. I had to move fast before their curiosity faded. Before I became just another regular in the crowd. That Thursday night, Maggie was more crowded than usual. As I scanned the room, I spotted Elena arriving with a group of realtors. To my surprise, Ashton wasn't with her. As the dance floor filled up, I saw my chance. I asked Elena to dance, pulling her in just a little closer. Then, before she didn't resist when the first song ended, I held onto her hand, guiding her into the next song without giving her a moment to step away again. No hesitation when we finally left thigh floor. I kept hold of her hand as I walked her back to the table, sitting beside her. With an air of confidence, I'd spent enough time with this crowd to know that people were talking over the past few weeks. I had danced with most of the women in the office by now. There were probably whispers about who I might pursue more seriously. If they were men, they'd likely have a betting pool running after a few more dances with others. I returned to Elena and asked her again, this time while swaying together. I casually asked for her number. She pretended not to hear me. Later, as we sat side by side, her hand still loosely resting in mine, I felt something slip into my palm beneath that. In that instant, everything clicked into place. Elena had never been faithful, not to Ashton, not even to Grant when Grant was deployed. She hadn't waited. She'd sent him a cold, impersonal letter cutting ties. She hadn't caused his death. That blame rested on Ashton. But anyone who had known Grant understood that Elena had played a role in his downfall. Now she had achieved her small victory, securing my attention, earning bragging rights for her. This wasn't really about me, it was about Ashton. But then again, who was Ashton really? Despite everything, I struggled to keep my thoughts focused on my larger goal, avenging Grant. Instead, my mind kept drifting to Jeannie. No matter how much I tried to push her from my thoughts, she always found a way back in. It irritated me, this unshakable fixation. I had learned a few things about her. She was divorced, had no kids, and stood around 5'10" with striking blonde hair. And despite all logic, I realized I was falling for her. My strategy had been simple: get close to Elena, drive a wedge between her and Ashton, and then take them down one at a time. But in order to make Elena believe I was genuinely choosing her, I had to ignore Jeannie that night at Maggie's. She was there watching. There was something in her. Her eyes, soft, almost pleading. It killed me to pretend I didn't notice. A few days after securing Elena's number, I invited her to dinner. She hesitated, mentioning her supposed commitment to Ashton, but in the end she agreed. She suggested a quiet place across town. We met at a Wendy's parking lot far from the apartment she shared with Ashton. Drove together for the 30-minute trip to the restaurant. Dinner was pleasant, accompanied by a bottle of wine. Afterward, I suggested a nearby bar. My friends had recommended. She agreed. Witnessed, had a couple more drinks, and before long she was leaning into me, asked if she wanted to come over for a nightcap, offering some brandy. I promised she'd enjoy before she had time to think. I pulled her close, our lips crashing together in a heated kiss. The alcohol buzzed through us, making every decision feel inevitable. Once we arrived at my apartment, I helped her out of the car. Our hands interlocked as we stepped inside. We never even touched the brandy at first. For all my talk of revenge, I'd been without intimacy for too long. The moment took over. Nothing else mattered. Her relationship with Ashton, my grudge against her. None of it right. Then my only focus was taking what I wanted, despite my resentment toward Elena. I let myself indulge. Later, after a drink and a quick shower, I drove her back to her car. Knew Elena would make sure the news got out. Women like her didn't keep secrets. It would spread, whispered from one person to the next, and eventually, everyone would know what bothered me. Most wasn't that the office would hear about it. It was the fact that Jeannie would. A week later, I stopped by Maggie after work. The moment I stepped inside, a few of the women greeted me with cheers and knowing glances. I took a seat at the bar, barely settling in before Ashton stormed in, flanked by two imposing men. He wasted no time confronting me. Acclaimed Elena told him I had been bothering her and her friends, pestering them while they were just trying to enjoy their night. His voice was full of Warning laced with barely contained danger, the bartender intervened. Before things got out of hand and after issuing his final threat, Ashton stormed out. Theramers had reached him, that much was clear. Elena had spun the story, covering her tracks by making it sound like I had been the pursuer, not the other way around. He had no idea what had really happened. No idea that she had spent an entire night in my bed. It was time to escalate. I reached out to two of my most trusted allies, Zachary Ramirez and Luke Buford. Zachary was all muscle, a relentless force in the gym. Luke, the easygoing one, had an unmatched ability to remain level-headed in the heat of battle. They listened as I laid out the plan. We chose Tuesday or Thursday, Ashton's usual nights at Maggie's, for the confrontation by Thursday. Everything was in place when I spotted Ashton alone without his usual entourage. I knew this was the moment. I walked up to him, reminding him of his threats from the week before. Then with deliberate ease, he let it slip. That night at Maggie's it had been just Elena and me, dinner at Luigi's, dancing, and afterward we had gone back to my place. The truth hung in the air between us, heavy and unshakable. This was just the beginning. She's remarkable in ways you might not expect. Those 3 small moles on her inner left thigh just above her hip. Touch them and she reacts instantly, but that's neither here nor there anyway. It's been good talking. I've got plans tonight, so I need to get moving. Thursday is when it all goes down. Ashton won't let this slide. He needs his retribution. And that's the next time we'll cross paths. My only concern is that he might take things too far with Elena and end up behind bars. If that happens, we'll just wait for his release and go through this all over again. I can't help but laugh, picturing Ashton making Elena undress just to verify those moles. They're real. I saw them with my own eyes when she was in my bed. I made sure to memorize every little detail. Things only someone who'd truly been with her would know. By the time Thursday arrived, everything was set. Luke Buford got to Maggie's at 6, took a stool at the bar, and nursed a beer while keeping an eye on things. He called me with an update. He spotted Ashton right away, exactly as I had described. But he wasn't alone. 3 heavy-set guys loitered nearby, not mingling, with the crowd just standing apart watching. Ashton kept pacing between them and the others as if he didn't quite belong to either group. Then Luke noticed her, a woman with a black eye and a swollen forehead. I described Elena, and he confirmed it was her. Ashton must have found the marks. I walked into the bar around 6:30, found a seat and waited. It took a moment to recognize Luke. By 7:15, as the last light faded outside, Ashton finally made his move. That's it, he said. You've had your fun. Elena played her games with me and now it's your turn, but you won't get off as easy as she did. I ordered another beer, making sure the bartender caught every word. If anyone needed to know who started it, he'd be the perfect witness. All right, I said, turning to Ashton. What's your plan? He sneered. If you're not a coward, step outside. He gave me a shove toward the door. His goons stayed behind, pretending this was a fair fight. I stood up, glanced at the bartender, and walked toward the exit. The bar owner, sensing what was coming, instinctively reached for the phone, probably dialing 911. I shook my head, signaling him to hold off. Meanwhile, my friend Luke Buford remained at the bar, chatting idly on the phone, looking like he had no concerns in the world. The second we were outside, the situation escalated. Ashton's 3 friends followed, but before they could act, everything turned upside down. For every man who stepped out that door, 2 Marines were waiting. 2 of Ashton's guys quickly realized they were outmatched. They took a few hard punches, hit the ground, and stayed down. The third was a bit slower on the uptake. He didn't stop until his nose was broken. Ashton, though, wasn't going to get off so lightly. This was for Grant. Ashton took blow after blow, punches, kicks, stomps. Every time he tried to get up, he was knocked right back down. He'd need an ambulance before the night was over. I could have stayed out of it, but I still landed one solid hit to his jaw, because I wanted to. Later we found out that if Ashton ever walked again, it would be with a cane. And as for fathering kids, not likely. To an outsider it might seem like overkill, vengeance taken too far. But for what Ashton had done, he was lucky he was still breathing. Grant never got that chance before we called 911. He made sure to tuck a copy of the letter into my pocket one day. Ashton would see it and understand exactly why this happened. When the dust settled, only Ashton and I remained. His so-called friends just wanted to get out of there. They weren't too hurt, but they knew better than to push their luck. The Marines, satisfied that justice had been served, got in their cars and disappeared into the night. The cops showed up after The ambulance left with Ashton. They spoke briefly with the bar owner, took some notes, and left. I figured they'd get to me eventually. But Ashton had started it, so there wasn't much left to ask. Inside, the bar was hushed. Everyone had heard the fight, but no one had dared toe-step outside. I sat down, at a table, locking eyes with Elena, pulling out 2 letters. I began speaking. Some of you knew Grant Kaufman through his wife. Elena, you probably heard he was killed in action. But what you don't know is that Grant didn't just die. He gave up. He received these 2 letters 1 week apart, one from Elena, the other from Ashton. I placed the letters on the table. He was so broken that he stopped fighting in "Let the enemy fire take him." I slid the letters forward, past them, around. Read them if you want. I was there when Grant fell. And what you heard outside that was his Navy brothers letting Ashton know exactly what they thought of his damn letter. The next day, I found myself in the parking lot of a commercial real estate office, watching the layoff crowd trickle out. A few familiar faces from Maggie passed by. I nodded to those who recognized me. Eventually, the one I had been waiting for appeared as she approached. I rolled down the window and called her name. She looked surprised but made her way over. "Hey, Simon," she said. "What up, G?" I replied. "I'd like to explain everything that's been happening with me and a couple of your coworkers." She smiled, walked around the car, and slid into the passenger seat. "How about now?" she asked, somewhere other than Maggie, and just like that, my life changed forever. From that moment, we were inseparable. Jeannie became a part of my world. Meeting my family, spending time with my parents and siblings, they all loved her. Eventually, she joined the family business, working with us at the tire shop. 2 years later, we gave my parents their first grandchildren, twin daughters. Ashton never went back to work. His injuries left him on disability. Elena stuck around for a bit, but eventually left town after those letters kept resurfacing. Sometimes I reflect on how lucky I am, how blessed I was to have Jeannie and our girls. And I think of Corporal Grant Kaufman, who never got the chance to have what I do. All because of those damn letters, my friend. And this is the end of the story. If you like this story, then put your royal like and subscribe to the channel. May the force be with you.